Powered by Righteous Media.
Welcome to Independent Americans. Welcome to episode 364. It is Friday, October 1st, and that means it's Halloween. Halloween is finally here. Happy Halloween. I'm your host, Paul Rieckhoff. It is also Football Friday. We're going to need it after this week. And we got a great show. Joining us today is California Congressman Ro Khanna to break down the latest. He'll be with us in a second. It's been a wild week. Hurricane Melissa has hit Jamaica and the Caribbean. Trump and Hegseth have hit more boats off the coast of Venezuela. The shutdown is continuing, especially intensifying as we reach the end of the month. World Series Game 6 is tonight. Toronto could wrap it up. Trump gave out candy at the White House in his annual weird kind of way. Halloween is here, and it looks like so is potentially war with Venezuela. We're finishing a big week of daily shows, and we're finishing with a flurry. And now is most definitely a time to stay vigilant. And to help us do that, we have a very, very smart, dynamic, engaged guest, a guy who is in the middle of all of it, a guy I've been eager to have on our show for many years, a man who I think has tremendous integrity and is importantly also at the cross-section of technology and politics, representing the 17th District of California, which includes Santa Clara, Alameda, and Silicon Valley. I am very proud to welcome to you today on Halloween, the great and powerful Congressman Ro Khanna. Welcome, Congressman, Independent Americans.
Well, thank you. I love your energy. I've done a lot of podcasts, but that's quite the opening. And I've, as you know, I've admired your career since you served in Iraq and came back, and you've been such a voice for our veterans. So thank you for having me on.
I appreciate you. We got to bring some energy, man. The country's going to need it right now because these are
That's for sure.
perilous times. I think we first met up on the Hill, maybe when I was working at IAVA. I'm eager to get into especially the breaking news about Venezuela. Want to talk about the shutdown. Going to get your Friday football picks too. But let's start off, sir, with a question I ask everyone. Where are you in the world today and how are you?
Well, I'm in Washington, D.C. That's where the rest of Congress should be. I don't understand how we have these kind of shutdowns, and the first thing we don't do is lock up every member of Congress and senator on the Capitol complex and say, you can't leave and you shouldn't be paid till you get government working. I mean, it's absurd. Troops don't get paid. The air traffic controllers don't get paid. Federal workers don't get paid. And sort of Congress is all over the place. So put aside the partisanship. We should just pass a rule when we get this government open again that members of Congress won't get paid and should be required to be at the Capitol complex if this government ever shuts down again.
Can you paint the scene? Like, I've worked on the Hill. I know Fridays are kind of ghost town, right? Everybody usually leaves town. They come in sometimes Monday night and they kind of only work Tuesday through Thursday often. And Fridays can be pretty quiet, but paint the picture for us if you can. There is a shutdown. How many of your colleagues are there today?
Not many. And the reality is Congress has not been open for the past 5 weeks. And look, Josh Hawley, a Republican senator, he had a bill. He said, let's extend SNAP benefits. I said, I'd vote for that. I'd vote for straight bills to extend SNAP benefits, pay the troops, pay essential federal workers. But we can't do any of that because Johnson, for the past 5 weeks, has basically shut down Congress. And, Thomas Massey and I believe the reason he's doing that is he doesn't want Adelita Grijalva sworn in so he can get the full release of the Epstein file. She'd be the 218 signature Marjorie Taylor Greene, Massey, myself, Lauren Boebert, Nancy Mace, and every Democrat are on the bill to release the files. And Johnson knows that the day he opens Congress, she'll be sworn in. The files, we'll have a vote to release the files. So, but, you don't shut down Congress while people aren't getting paid and SNAP benefits are going to be rescinded.
Sir, let me take a step back. You're also the father of two, I believe, right?
Yeah.
I don't know what your kids are going to be for Halloween and if you're dressing up or not, but I'd love to know. But how are you? I mean, it's a tough job. I'm going to ask this of everybody, but you're in elected office. There are assassination attempts. There's violence. There's toxicity. How are you and your family in a moment like this?
Well, I appreciate your asking. I've got a very supportive wife and supportive family, and I I keep them out of it because of the issue of toxicity today. I mean, I try to be the public-facing person in politics and let families stay out of it. But look, it's nothing compared to what you risked. It's nothing compared to what our troops risk. It's nothing compared to people who are really struggling hard, who have to do things every day. So I think it's an incredible honor and privilege to be able to be in Congress. And I have that attitude every day. There are a lot of people who have had life much harder and taken much bigger risks than being a member of Congress.
I appreciate that perspective. I think it's important, but I also think it's important for folks to know that I think a lot of folks in elected office and the media are not talking about the fact that, I mean, I've said this before. When I leave the house and say goodbye to my kids and know that I'm going to a place like CNN or I'm going to a place like NBC, that I could be in harm's way. I mean, it kind of feels like you're going outside the wire to engage in politics, and you never know if when you say goodbye is the last time you say goodbye to your family. I mean, do you think about that at all? I mean, you're in Congress. You were there for January 6th. You've seen
Yeah.
what's happening to your colleagues. Do you think about that, or you're just, is it like when you're going on a combat tour, you just kind of put it somewhere else because you can't control a lot of things and you just got to go do your job?
You know, I was locked in the Capitol in my office on January 6th, and we thought of it afterwards. But the Charlie Kirk assassination really hit me and hit a lot of us because it was this idea that you could be on a college campus, anyone speaking, and you could be taken out. And, you know, that sent chills of fear, not just the outrageous, horrific act of violence and the fact that you see Erica Kirk in the video of I mean, they've been playing it where Charlie Kirk had his daughter running to him on set, and I mean, you feel just as a someone with a family, heartbroken for what they've gone through. But it also sent chills to people saying, "Look, you go to a rally, that could be." And I talked to Governor Cox, who I think has been really thoughtful on this in Utah about how we start to reduce the rhetoric, the extremism, the hate, and the social media algorithms that are basically making us hate each other, preying on our psychological weaknesses. We've got to do better in this country. And I don't believe it's just a returning insult for insult. And, you know, Emmanuel Cleaver says, when you return fire with fire, all you're left with is ashes. We've got to figure out a way out of this mess.
I feel you on that, and I think a lot of folks will celebrate that no matter where they are in the political aisle. Speaking of fire and ashes, I want to get to our top story today. This is, you know, we always kick off the show with something where I say, if you're not angry, you're not paying attention. And I think that is especially true of today's top topic. Sir, as we record this on Friday afternoon, there are reports from the Miami Herald and others that strikes on Venezuela by the Trump administration are imminent. This has been a telegraph punch, in my view. I think this is to be expected. He said he will strike in the mainland on Venezuela. He said he will potentially put troops on the ground. There may already probably be covert assets on the ground there, and absolutely no congressional approval, not even consultation. I would normally ask you, hey, sir, you know, have you been briefed on this? I'll let you answer that. But I assume the answer is no, because it seems like nobody's being briefed in Congress anymore. And now there's pushback from Republicans, including Rand Paul and others. We haven't had a formal declaration of war since World War II. This is not the way it's supposed to be done. And now we're sending more American men and women in harm's way without even briefing the country on what our objective is. I want to ask you to respond to the breaking news and also ask you something I'm going to ask every elected leader. I think the biggest story in the world is that Donald Trump can do whatever he wants with the most powerful military on the planet. My question for you and anyone else serving in Congress is, are you going to stop him? Is there anything you can do to stop him? Are you doing anything to stop him or even slow him down?
Well, it's outrageous. I mean, I've been on the Armed Services Committee 9 years, and we did have a briefing, but the briefing was about the strikes on boats, and we can get into that. There has been zero briefing that we were going to consider striking inside Venezuela. And today, the Miami Herald and the Wall Street Journal are reporting that Donald Trump is seriously considering doing that. And in fact, the Miami Herald says we're hours away from a potential decision to do that. The American people keep voting against regime change wars. They keep voting against these endless wars. They don't want us to get into another war of toppling Maduro like we got into a war in Iraq and Libya and 20 years in Afghanistan. Trump ran against that. And yet it seems we've got these forces that keep pushing us in that direction. Now, I've spoken with Senator Rand Paul. He's obviously been a strong voice, but there are, Paul, a lot of Republicans. They may not be public, but I know they're on the Armed Services Committee and others who are appalled by what Hegseth is doing and appalled that we are not being consulted in Congress. And here's my plea to them. I put out a video this just a few minutes ago. We need to speak up. Democrats, Republicans, if you're watching this, please speak up. The decision has not been made. This is a time we've got to say you cannot just go in and strike Venezuela and have a war and try to topple Maduro. First of all, we don't know what comes next. This is the biggest thing. We topple Maduro. How do we know what's going to happen? The mission of toppling is always easy. It's the rebuilding that it's hard. And then we end up spending billions of dollars there as opposed to spending money here at home on creating jobs here, on helping people with their costs here.
So, sir, I really want to drill down a little bit harder because, there's an old saying, you can make plans or make excuses, right? And I hear what you're saying. I hear a lot of Democrats, but what are the actual plans to react, right? I mean, what legislatively, what can you do? Because right now, he doesn't care. He doesn't care what you say. He doesn't care who speaks up because so far, the Democrats especially have failed in stopping him from doing anything, whether it's striking Iran, whether it's striking boats off Venezuela, whether it's deploying U.S. troops on American soil. He doesn't care, right? I mean, he's throwing two middle fingers up to his own party and to yours. Is there any plan from you or anyone else to escalate the legislative, the policy, the legal reactions to what seems to be a steamroller that isn't slowing down and could expand to other countries? He said he'll hit Mexico. What's stopping him from doing that? It doesn't feel like anyone can stop him from doing anything right now.
Well, Paul, the only thing that can stop him and did stop him to some extent in Iran is building a coalition that includes MAGA voters. So Thomas Massie and I, when he was hitting Iran, introduced a war powers resolution together to say, look, you can't hit Iran. And it wasn't just Massie, Bannon, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Tucker Carlson. He started to hear from his base, no, don't get us into a war in Iran. That's not what you promised. Now, he did hit them, but he got out with in 1 day. That was not what Netanyahu wanted. That is not what a lot of the hawks wanted. They wanted him to go in and basically eliminate the regime. So when you get MAGA as part of a coalition, it can be effective. It's just me and Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer screaming, no one's going to care. It's not going to move the needle one bit. We've got to partner with people in the Freedom Caucus and MAGA. We did that with Epstein. That's making a difference. We're actually going to get a vote. So what do we need to do in Venezuela? There are people I know from private conversations, Republicans on the Armed Services Committee, who do not want this to happen. They also want to know, who's making the decision on life and death on these boats. Because when our military is killing people, that's what they're doing. The American people are owed an explanation if they're going to kill people on our behalf of why those people are being killed and what the process is. We need them to speak up. So I'm working with Massie. I'm working with Rand Paul. We're going to try to introduce a war powers resolution. Ilhan Omar, others have also done that. It's got to be a left-right coalition that says we're sick of this. And then we've got to get to 218 votes in the House and the Senate. But it's a fallacy to say that Donald Trump can't be stopped. He can't be stopped if no Republicans and MAGA support speak up. If he has his party's complicity, he can't be stopped. But if we get some people speaking up there, I do think he can be stopped.
I mean, maybe it's a sign of how extreme these times are that we can get Marjorie Taylor Greene and you together on the same page and potentially, Ilhan Omar and others. I mean, it underscores the severity of the situation. But let me ask you this, because I've been critical of both parties, and I often call the Democrats the failocrats because it feels like they fail over and over again. Is this not, if he does move forward with this, you come from an area not far from the Ronald Reagan Library, right? We all remember, those of us who are old enough, Iran-Contra. That was a scandal back then. We have like Iran-Contra level scandals every week now. If he does move forward without congressional authorization, without consultation, is it not an impeachable offense? And you think there's anybody in Congress who would push that tactic?
It is. I mean, if he really gets us into a war in Venezuela. Now, well, Paul, we've got to, that would be on a scale worse than other presidents. But this is not just a Donald Trump issue. There have been Democratic presidents when it came to to refueling Saudi planes hitting Yemen, when it came to the war in Libya, that have taken license in riding roughshod over Article 1 in the Constitution. I mean, that just is the truth. And the reason Massey and I have a relationship where we work together is we have called out Democratic presidents, we've called out Republican presidents, and we've said there's a reason that the Constitution gives this power to Article 1, because when you're members of Congress, you've got to go home and you meet the veterans and you meet the families of people, Gold Star families, and they're in your offices and they're telling you what people have lost and sacrificed. And sometimes when you become president and you're looking at your legacy and glory, you get lost from the day-to-day suffering and sacrifices that you're asking Americans to make. So I fundamentally believe that we should be standing up for this power. If Donald Trump moves in an unconstitutional direction, absolutely. We need to be having all options on the table, including impeachment. But that is what is going to stop him or get him to reconsider, is getting more Republicans speaking up. And I know some of your listeners are independents, Republicans, some of them probably voted for Trump. You're the most effective in speaking out, saying, look, this is not what we voted for.
I appreciate that. I also don't think he gives a shit. I think he's going full bore, seizing the levers of power and flexing his muscle in whatever ways he has always wanted to do, and then some. I mean, he wants it all. I keep saying, it's like Despicable Me. He wants the moon. And the question is, like, can anyone stop him? I want to move to our next segment, which I think is related, but also important. In the midst of all this, I think too often there are issues that are under the radar. And one right now is still the shutdown. For many Americans, the shutdown is under the radar. It is October 1st. Tomorrow, today, people don't get paid. I've talked to active duty military folks this week at Fort Bragg and other places. They're trying to figure out how to make ends meet, especially junior enlisted who have multiple kids and have a spouse that potentially works in the federal government. This is hitting hard now. And I want to ask you, if I can, I think the Epstein fight is a smart one. You guys have limited ammo, you have limited power, you have fragmented leaders. I think as a party, you have to pick your spots. And I would argue Epstein's a good one. There's some bipartisanship there. You can win. You can slow him down. You can get the middle behind you. I don't think the shutdown is a good fight for you guys. I think you're going to get steamrolled. I think you're losing more than he is losing, in part because he dominates the narrative. And whether it's fair or not, he blames it on you. And I think either he'll pull a rabbit out of the hat and figure out a way to fund the troops and take credit, or he won't fund them and he'll blame it on you. Can you give us your assessment? Do you think this is still a fight worth fighting, given now 30 days in how high the stakes are?
Look, we got to bring this to a close, partly and open up government and fund government. Partly the air safety is an issue. I mean, we can't keep going where we don't have air traffic controllers coming in. And some of the routine safety logs are not being read. In other words, every time you fly, there's always something that may go wrong or off. And those reports are submitted to the FAA. And over time, they're analyzed so that people can make sure that everything is fixed. Those things are not being read. At some point, that impacts the safety of the entire system. Then you've got people who aren't getting food assistance, 16 million kids going hungry. You've got the situation of the troops. I mean, even put aside if you can always get some rich billionaire to fund them. I've talked, as you have, to the troops and their families. Psychological stress were causing them. One mom said that she had her parents ready to pay for her kids because she didn't know if she was going to get paid, and she's serving our country. That's abominable that we're putting people through that. So we need to get this open. The challenge is, and what the Democrats have built this fight on, there's a West Virginia couple whose insurance currently, they make $85,000. Their insurance is going to go up $4,000 a month. And the reality is, if we don't get some concession, even if it's for a year, 2 years, on these Affordable Care Act tax credits, you're going to have extraordinary increase in people's premiums. So I think they'll come to an agreement on some sense. We're going to get a vote, some extension. Michael Lawler, Republican, he said, look, do it for 1 year if he can convince his leadership on that. I don't know why the Trump or the Republicans would want people's health care premiums spiking on their watch. And so my hope is we can come to some agreement on that.
Mike Lawler's been on this show. I hope he'll come back again. He represents a district I grew up in. But you're talking about this thing called common sense that doesn't exist right now in the White House, right? Yeah, you can negotiate with Mike Lawler, but you're not negotiating with Mike Lawler, right? You're negotiating with Donald Trump. And Donald Trump is happy to have the government closed. He's happy to use it as a lever to lay off more people and continue where Doge left off. So we're going to get this game of chicken where you guys are trying to make this healthcare argument, which I think is a noble one and an important one. But I think at some point, the costs are going to be too high because you're going to have troops not getting paid. You're going to have national security risks. You're going to have airports closed. I mean, at what point, I'm sure you've had discussions. Let's assume it's a stalemate. Somebody's going to have to fold here or our country is going to fold. So are you guys going to just dig in or are you personally just going to dig in if this goes another month? Is that doable for you?
No, I mean, I'm of the view that we have to look for a solution. You know, there were several labor leaders in my office the other day, and they're floated the solution. Let's at least get a commitment for a date of a vote. I think we've got to figure out what the solution is because, you know, I can't have it on my conscience that kids are going hungry, that troops aren't getting paid. So I think you're getting the sense in the caucus that we're going to fight like anything to try to get the healthcare benefits increased, but that we've got to figure out a way to try to get this resolved. And the deadline is tomorrow. I mean, that's when the benefits start to really be stripped away.
Yesterday we had Colonel Vindman on, and he reintroduced everybody to the phrase, taco, and that Trump, always folds. But I feel like this is one of those situations where I'm not betting on you guys to hold out on this. I feel like the Democrats are going to have to fold. I think you're going to, because I keep going back to this when it comes to the national narrative. He's got every airwave. He's consolidating his propaganda machines. You guys are throwing up Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer, and he's throwing up Dana White, and you guys are getting your ass kicked. So I think over time, he's going to be happy to drive down the Democratic brand even further. And I guess what I want to ask you, please,
I'll answer your question, but
when Republicans like to do shutdowns, right? And they're good at it in part because they keep that unity and they keep that integrity within the party, but they always carve out an exception for troops. They always do that, right? And when they've Democrats in the past, but the Democrats have refused to do that. The Democrats have refused to say we don't want to put one group in front of the other. Would you not, maybe in the next 24 hours, create a carve out just for active duty military in the interest of national security?
Absolutely, I'd vote for that. But I've said I'd vote for that. If you gave me a clean bill to pay the troops today, I'd vote for that. I think a lot of Democrats would vote for that. If you gave me Josh Hawley's bill, clean bill, just extend the SNAP benefits, I'd vote for that. And, but we got to have Congress open to do it. Look, I don't know on the shutdown fight how it's cutting politically. I think where the Democrats' focus should be is you've had all these mass layoffs at Amazon, at UPS, Nestle, Microsoft. You've got AI and all these tech billionaires. They're all in my district. They're making a ton of money. But what's happening to the average person around this country? Their electricity bills are going up. The cost of living is high. They don't know whether they're going to have the American dream. That Donald Trump promised new factories, new jobs. Where are there? And we have a better roadmap to good jobs for your families and your kids. And that's the ground that the Democrats should be arguing on the economy and what we're going to do to deliver for people so that all the wealth doesn't just keep coming to my district. I mean, for a guy who ran on Forgotten Americans, he loves Silicon Valley a lot. I mean, if his goal was to enrich my district, he's succeeding. If his goal was to help Warren, Ohio, I don't judge his scorecard that high.
I think that you come from an important perspective. That's why I'm so happy to have you on the show, because when Elon Musk and Doge were ripping through the federal government, they were laying off federal workers, and roughly 40% are veterans. For decades, you and others worked with us on improving transitional pathways for veterans into employment. A lot of it was into technology, and they're laying off now thousands and thousands of veterans, and they're not giving them a jobs program. They're not hiring at Tesla. I mean, there's no off ramp here, and I think that part of it is really a betrayal and basically unwinding the work we've worked in a bipartisan manner to create for so long. So I'm rooting for you. I feel like you're one of the guys who has a chance to get us toward an agreement. And I think folks should do the same. If I hear you and Mike Lawler are talking, that's great. Like, I hope you guys can get something done, because the stakes are high and I think folks are really, really frustrated. And Trump doesn't care about his popularity ratings. I think that's part of the difference here. It's like Putin. Putin doesn't care how many soldiers he kills. When you're fighting somebody who doesn't care about the cost of war, it creates a heck of a challenge. And I feel like he doesn't care what kind of cost this war has on the American people, and you guys do. So I'm rooting for you and Lawler on this, especially.
Well, I appreciate it. Laura's a guy I work with. We're working together on trade schools. We're working together on how do we create jobs in an AI world. And I agree that we've got to try to figure this out. But I'd be curious your views, because so many people have felt that the Democratic Party is kind of been feckless, weak, not standing up for things. My focus partly has been that the technology revolution has just piled up wealth in the hands of these tech billionaires. And, one of the things I tell them, and they don't like it when I say this, I said, I have much more respect for the people who wore the uniform or people who scaled the cliffs of Normandy or fought for our freedoms than just a tech CEO. Doesn't mean I don't agree, like what you're doing or an entrepreneur, but look at the people who built this country, who fought for our freedoms. Like, okay, you're building wealth, but you got to have some sense of what the common national purpose is. And I call it economic patriotism. I think the Democratic Party should say, we can't have a country where just these tech billionaires are controlling the media, controlling whether your kids will have jobs. And what we're going to do is give a real roadmap to the economic future for your families. And by the way, people know that tariffs and like threatening to conquer Canada isn't going to build modern wealth. That's not how we built $18 trillion in Silicon Valley. So we should be the party of like putting more money in your pockets, helping you become richer, but not just in Silicon Valley, around the country.
I think you should be. I don't think you are, and I think it's going to be really challenging if Mamdani wins next Tuesday and Trump is able to label your party even more left. And I think the most moderate and independent Americans view the Democratic Party is moving further left, the Republican Party moving further to the right, and we're all stuck in the middle with shitty options. I think that's where most Americans are, and an increasing number of them are leaving the Republican and the Democratic Party. But you put your finger on something that I don't think gets enough attention. We have a generation of business leaders who've never served their country. And nowhere is that more acute than in Silicon Valley. I remember going to Silicon Valley in like 04, 05, 06. I was one of the first veterans to come in. I was there from Planet Veteran, right? I went to Hollywood. I was one of the first veterans to go there, trying to explain the modern military to so few people that had served. And there were no executives. There were no COOs. There were no folks in Silicon Valley, in technology companies, who had served in the military. And I think what that created was a lack of connection, a lack of patriotism, a lack of service, but also a lack of values, right? I mean, this isn't World War II where everybody who was in business had served and had that collective connection. And I think it's a really underreported part of the story. Now the Pentagon's there, right? And you know that the innovation that's coming out of Silicon Valley is so critical to the Pentagon. And I think there are a lot of technology leaders that understand now how big the defense budget is, and they think that can be profitable for them. But it doesn't come necessarily from a sense of patriotism. And I think that's why so many of them have such malleable value. As I look at Benioff, who, a couple weeks ago said, yeah, let's throw in the National Guard to be cops. I've met Mark Benioff. I've spoken with Mark Benioff. I think he's out of his mind. That's not what the National Guard was built to do. But he changed it. He walked it back. This is not a time for people with the values of Elon Musk to be leading our country. So I hope that you can remind them of that. I hope we can inject a sense of service. And I hope there are more veterans that are working their way up through the ranks and people who just have a connection to our country beyond profit. I think Scott Galloway's talked a lot about this, but a lot of these guys have benefited tremendously from the environment in this country. And I think it's long past time for them to give more back.
I couldn't agree more. Look, I was born in Philadelphia in 1976, our bicentenary, and I grew up, hanging out with people who built steel and were electricians and people whose families had generations serving. And one of the reasons I'm on the Armed Services Committee, even though I've not served, is because I recognize that technology in Silicon Valley was essential for us to lead a 21st century military against China, the attritable drones and autonomous vehicles. But the perspective I have is that the greatness of America is not just Silicon Valley and entrepreneurs and trillionaires. The greatness is the people who fought for our freedom, who built the steel and mined the coal mines and built this country so that we have those opportunities. That's not taking away from brilliant entrepreneurs, but they have to have the humility that they didn't write the American story. They're probably a page in the American story, but they didn't write the American story. And it's the arrogance. It's the arrogance. If the new sort of tech aristocracy, they go and dine with President Trump one evening, and then they go and dine with the British king a week later. And it's like, no, we don't have an aristocracy in this country. That's really my problem with what's going on. So you're absolutely right. I think having more people who served the country in these positions in tech would be very helpful.
It's also a rise of a new generation of chicken hawks. People who think that war is a video game, or that everything can be done through a drone strike, and they've never personally put their skin or their children's lives in jeopardy. And that's why anybody who gets on TV with me or anywhere else and says, "Yeah, I'm willing to strike Venezuela. Let's put boots on the ground." Okay, you gonna go? Are your kids gonna go? Are you willing to do that? I think that's the hard question you have to ask anybody who is okay with this, because too often it's patriotism light. And I think we need to challenge that. But I love this discussion. I want to take you maybe back to your Philly roots, maybe down to some of this Guts of America piece. You're joining us on Friday, which is a great thing, because we do every Friday, we do Football Friday.
Body, Friday football, we taking the stage.
So I'm going to keep it local for you, sir. I'm going to ask you to make two picks.
Yeah.
Football has been great. Baseball's been great. I don't know if you have a pick in the World Series. I assume you got to root
My
for the
Phillies
Dodgers.
lost to the Dodgers, but Ohtani, we kept Ohtani from doing anything. Then he just sort of, it's been unbelievable in the World Series, and yet it's still not good enough for Toronto. I've been surprised that, Toronto's ahead. We'll see.
Tonight is the defining moment for Ohtani, or at least the newest defining moment for Ohtani. So we'll see. That'll be exciting. But we've got a kind of not a great week of college football. I want to pull out one game that I think is interesting. Number 15, Virginia, who's 7-1, is going into Cal. They're going into Berkeley. Great environment there. Cal's resurgent. They're 5-3. Who are you picking in that one, sir? Virginia or Cal?
First of all, it's an odd thing that we're going to have an ACC game in California. You know what? No longer the Pac-12. Even though Cal's been the home team, they get into brawls and stuff. I gotta say, I'm not sure that I think Virginia probably pulls this one out. If we're going with who's producing Nobel laureates, I'd go with the Cals. We got 5 of them this year, but we got a ways to go still with football. I'm sure I'm going to hear about this.
That's a true test. I think it's a true test of whether you're a bullshit politician or not, is whether you'll pick against your team. And that, I think that's a testament to your integrity. I'm going to back you up on that one. I'm going to go with Virginia. It's good to see Cal competitive again, but I'm going to go with Virginia. Let's go to an NFL game. The NFL continues to be fast and furious and full of parity. Your 5-3 is also my 10-year-old son Ryder's favorite team. They got George Kittle back. They're 5-3. They've weathered a lot of injuries. They're going to play my Giants, who are like a Halloween disaster in and of themselves. We've lost Cam Scattaboo, although he might try to play in a wheelchair. We don't know how that's going to go. But the Flyers are coming into Jersey for the Giants. Who you got in that one, sir?
I got the 49ers. Look, I think Mike Shanahan has done a hell of a job coaching. I mean, as you know, we don't have Purdy. We didn't have Nick Bosa. We lost Warner. We've had a lot of injuries, but we're a solid team. And with Killback, I think we're going to pull it out.
I'm with you. It sucks, but I got to admit it. I mean, right now, without Scattaboo, without Malik Neighbors, I think they're going to bring 11 on Jackson Dart all day long. And I just hope Jackson Dart makes it through the season. I think we have a scenario where Dart could be out. Russell Wilson could come in and get knocked out. And we might have Jameis Winston starting pretty soon in New York, which will at least be colorful. But every Friday, we're going to do Football Friday. Thank you for doing that, sir.
Something good, something sweet. Feel the fire,
we like to end the show with something good. You focus on such important issues. You do it with integrity and honesty. But we want to end the week with something good. I'll start out and then I'll come to you. Yesterday I recommended everybody check out, be a part of Halloween. It's kind of one of the unique shared experiences we have in America. Almost every religion and cultural background, almost everybody does Halloween. There are, of course, exceptions, but I want to encourage people to do that. Today, I got a really simple one. If you want something fun to do with your family, watch Is It Cake? There's a Halloween edition on Netflix. It's a cooking competition hosted by Mikey Day, who is married to a good friend of mine from college. Great guy, great family. If you want some alternative to the chaos and potential war in Venezuela, you can turn on a couple episodes of Is It Cake Halloween edition with your family, and you won't be disappointed. It's something good. Congressman Ro Khanna, what do you got? What's something good?
For all the people who are understandably angry, frustrated about how this country has taken a turn to hate and extremism, I look at it from when I grew up in Philadelphia in the 19 and to where we are now. And you've got the Vice President Vance talking about his wife, who's Indian American of Hindu faith, Mamdani, regardless of his ideology, an African-born, someone of Muslim faith who's going to represent New York. Vivek Ramaswamy of Hindu faith could be governor of Ohio. It's sort of like this country is succeeding and becoming more inclusive in spite of ourselves. And sometimes I think we forget how incredible a nation we are that we allow people of different backgrounds to participate. We're not perfect. We got a lot of problems, but we're still, in my view, better than anywhere else in the world.
I love that. That is definitely something good. It's something great that you are such a great role model for your children and for children in this country. And I think you show what's possible in this country. And I know your family is very proud of you, but I think all Americans should be proud of you and your leadership and that message, especially. Are you dressing up for Halloween?
I am, with the family, I'm going to be a king because of a request. I would have made it political and put no kings, but no politics in Halloween.
Well, that fits kind of well because this is what I wore to this morning with the kids. I had my full Lion King costume. I'm going to spare you. I'm going to spare you the muscles and everything else I've got here.
I love it.
But
I love it.
We didn't plan this, but you said that just in time. Sir, I want to thank you for joining us. Thank you for being a good sport.
I want to thank you. And your words, look, your words mean a lot because of what you've sacrificed for the country. You're the real deal. And we're lucky to have your voice and leadership. And I know we're going to have it in many ways for years to come.
Well, I thank you. There a lot of folks have asked if you would run for president because of the way you approach many of these situations. Maybe I'll ask you before you go. You going to run for president?
You gonna run? You gonna run? Maybe we'll
That's a deflection. That's a deflection.
Sure.
If you maybe I'll run for president of the school board at this point. I don't know, but that's not a no, right?
You never say no to anything. But the point is that we got work to do. But I'll tell you something. I think that whoever's going to become president has got to talk to people like you and your audience. I mean, that's what the Democratic Party lost. I mean, it's sort of. And we lost them because we weren't relatable. We were arrogant. I tell people the biggest thing I have in politics, my grounding, it comes from growing up in Pennsylvania. I had little league coaches who said, Ro still hits. They used to chant, "Watch the bunt," because I could feel I could never hit well. But, I had people. I grew up collecting baseball cards. We watch Rocky movies, and it's like we've lost touch with just ordinary folks, and we think we're better than them sometimes. And I think that the most important thing for the party is to get connected back to the real heroes, people who serve in the military, the helpers. You've read the books to your kids, firefighters, nurses, EMTs, police. Who do they celebrate? They don't have pictures of Congress people and lawyers. Who are the helpers? And they look up to the military, to the firefighters, to the police. We got to get back in touch with what built this country and celebrating this country. I think it's that simple. And then I think we got to offer an economic vision of how people are going to have success.
Well, they've got to be able, for the Democrats to succeed, they've got to be able to snatch the mic and they've got to be able to tell a story. And I think you're able to do that uniquely. And that's why I think so many folks are watching you and celebrating you. And I am rooting for you as a person of integrity and leadership. I want to thank you again for joining us. Folks, we are daily now. If you don't know, hit the subscribe button on YouTube, on Spotify, everywhere. Share far and wide that Independent Americans is now daily. And we're bringing great guests like Congressman Ro Khanna, who I hope will join us again. I will be on MSNBC again next week. I'll be on CNN, I think, on Monday. I will be on News Nation every Wednesday with Colin McShane. Special thanks to all our guests this week. Captain Cons, who joined us for Manosphere Monday, Barbara Starr, John Reed, Lieutenant Colonel Alex Vindman, and Congressman Ro Khanna. Subscribe, share the word, and remember that you are not alone in your vigilance. We're all vigilant, especially now. And I wish everyone a very, very happy Halloween. Thanks for rolling with us. We will see you on Monday. Until next time, I'm Paul Rieckhoff. Thank you for tuning in to Independent Americans. Stay vigilant, America. And happy Halloween. Happy Halloween. Thank you, sir.
Powered by Righteous Media.